Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Even if you're making the pizza with me or you're just here listening, feel free to ask questions throughout the class. The idea is that you're able to know everything, every detail of the pizza making process so that you are able to make it in the future. You should have your recipe handout with you. I said preheat your oven, max temperature with the pizza stone or baking tray inside. And we are going to start by making our dough. Before I get into everything bread, I always like to start by introducing myself. So I'm Javi. I am the owner of Vituperio. I'm a bread baker and I teach bread baking classes, pasta, online, virtually recorded, in person in Lansdale. That's where I have the studio. So that's a little bit about myself. As you can tell from my name and my accent, I'm not from here. I'm from South America. I'm from Chile, actually, from Santiago. So if there's anything throughout the class that you don't understand because of my accent or if it's bread related, feel free to reach out. Raquel, if you can see her there on the back, it's on the computer, so she'll be answering your questions. So feel free to type anything and she'll take care of it. And if there's anything that she cannot answer, she'll make sure to let me know so that I can answer for everyone here on the video. Okay, so that said, let's start. Throughout the class also, I'm going to make sure that I have everyone muted so that if you have, I don't know, any noise on the back, you are not disturbing a little bit the class. So I'm just gonna make sure that everyone's muted. If you want to say something, raise your hand and we'll unmute you so that you can speak. Okay, I'm going to switch the camera so that I can show you how to start making the dough. So you can see here, I have the bowl. I actually made Polish for 4 pizzas. So what you see in my bowl is 420 grams of all-purpose flour, the 420 grams of water, and 2 grams of yeast that I did there in the morning. I mixed it and I let it sit throughout the day at room temperature right here on my kitchen counter, and this is how it looks. It rose, it looks very airy, bubbly, fluffy, and this is going to be a great trick to make pizza because if you read the recipe handout, when we are working with a pre-ferment that is called, in this case, Polish, the Polish actually gives the dough 3 particular characteristics. That is elasticity, more flavor, and more shelf life, in terms that you probably notice if you buy like fresh bread, the next day is hard as a rock. Okay, so Polish will allow us to have a dough that stays moist and fluffy and fresh for longer. So this is our Polish. We are going to start by weighing it. So go get a different bowl. Turn your digital scale on. As always, we are using grams. So make sure that the unit that you see there says grams. And all digital scales have that magic button that says tare, in which you can zero out the weight of the container so that you don't have to do the math every time you add an ingredient. When you are a beginner, I always recommend that you weigh the ingredients separately. So we're going to weigh the Polish, the water, the flour separately, just in case that if we need to adjust anything, we can. When we're doing this amount of dough, which is not that much, it's 1,200 grams, you want to be off by 1 gram the most, because if not, you can really change the texture of the dough. So go ahead and start weighing your Polish. Make sure that you're reading the column that corresponds to the amount of Polish that you make. If you're making 4, you are weighing 680 grams of Polish. If you are making 2 pizzas, you are weighing 340 grams of Polish. As I'm making 4, I'm going to make sure that I tared my scale, it's zeroed, and I'm going to weigh 680 grams. You're going to notice that it's almost everything that you made, because there's a lot of grams that stay stuck in the bowl. Right, 688. I'm going to try to be as precise as possible. I have 680. So I'm perfect grams for my 4 pizzas. And let me move my bowl there so that you can see it better. Okay, so my Polish for 4 pizzas is weighed in a separate bowl. You are going to weigh the water. You can use anything. I have these containers and I can weigh the water. So I'm going to tare, I'm going to 0. There looks better. And the water is going to be 127 for 4 pizzas. Remember, if you're doing only 2, you need to check the amount of grams for 2. So 129 I have. I'm going to take, I think that was too much. 123. And I want to be off, as I said, by 1 gram the most. There, 127. So I have my water here. I'm going to put it in the bowl with a Polish that I weighted. So I'm going to throw it in there. I'm going to put it on the side as I weigh the flour. So go ahead and weigh your flour. I already have it pre-weighed here for me. And in my case, as I'm making 4 pizzas, I'm weighing 374 grams of all-purpose flour. So go ahead and do that. In the meantime, as I wait for everyone, I'm not going to do anything or combine anything. The only thing that you should have combined is the Polish and the water. And you should be weighing your flour for now. There, if you have any questions, feel free to type them. There, if you're done weighing your flour, make a little sign so that we know. No? Alia Cassandra, did I say it right? There, so as you can see, I have my Polish for 4 pizzas with the water here, and in a separate bowl, I have the flour. I am going to start by dissolving the Polish in the water. Stephanie, are you already done weighing the flour? Yes? Okay, good. So I'm going to start. I'm going to put my hand inside. And if it's your first time making any type of bread dough, the feeling of the Polish with the water feels very funny. So I'm going to try to dissolve it as much as I can. And then I'm going to put all the flour inside my bowl. So I have my flour here, and I'm just going to put it all in. Everything inside, and then when you are mixing dough, bread dough, in this case it's pizza, you don't want to be, this is what I get usually in class. People do just like that. The idea is that you put your fingers in and thoroughly mix, because you want to have no dry spots. So look at this. I'm like squishing the dough in between my fingers. That's what I'm doing. So I'm not being very nice with the dough. I'm just making sure that I combine it with the flour that I added. And trying to bring the flour here closer to my dough, that it's more hydrated. And I keep combining with my hand. If this part of the process, for example, you wanted to use a KitchenAid or any stand mixer that you have, you can absolutely do it. And you just need to make sure that you use the dough hook, which is that little piggy tail, which is meant for bread baking. Okay, so make sure that you are combining all the flour. Most of the moisture always in the dough is in the middle. So that's why you want to squeeze to be able to bring that flour inside. Here. I still need to mix a little bit more. And the dough should completely be stuck to your hands. That's the idea at this part of the process. And also, it's really useful to only use one of your hands. With the other one, you want to hold the bowl. Because if not, it's really difficult to be able to sort of like maneuver the dough. So I'm almost there in terms of having most of the flour incorporated in the dough. I only have this little part to be combined. So I'm gonna go there. And then I try to use the dough to clear the bowl a little bit. There. Raquel, any questions so far?
Somebody did ask when to add the salt.
We're not gonna add the salt yet. Okay, we're going to mix the dough. So this part, we're going to let it rest for 10 minutes. And after that, we're going to add the salt. So for now, it's only Polish water and flour in your bowl. There. Okay, if you look at my bowl, you can see that all the flour is fully combined with my dough. Always check for the bottom because always there's some flour there that hides. And I'm going to give it one more mix. And this is good to go. Until when do you want to mix? Until the flour has been fully combined with the dough. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to use a very useful tool in the bread world, a scraper. So I'm going to, you can use a spatula also, that does the work. But just to make sure that I scrape off most of the dough that I have in my hands, and I don't lose any grams of our pizza dough. Remember that if you joined late, you need to turn your oven on with your pizza stone or any surface that you're going to use to bake your pizza. And what we've done so far is just weighing the ingredients, flour, water, Polish, and we just combined them. At this point, we are going to set a timer and we are going to let the dough rest for 10 minutes. After we let the dough rest, we're going to add the salt, and then we're going to let the dough rest again, and then we're going to add the olive oil. Okay, so this is going to go step by step. So I'm going to leave the dough here to rest. Feel free to cover it with plastic wrap. I have actually wrap that I used before for the Polish. The idea of wrapping the dough at this point is if you have pets, if there's hair around or anything, that it doesn't contaminate our dough. That's the only idea because it's just a short amount of time before we get back to our dough. So my hand is a little doughy. Make sure that you go wash your hands thoroughly, clean your station before we move to our next step. I am going to set a timer for 10 minutes so that we can know when to add the salt. So let me do that in the meantime. And everyone, you should be finishing mixing your dough. And let me switch my camera. There. As I showed you, I have my hand super doughy, so I'm going to wash it in the meantime as everyone finishes up mixing their dough. How is everyone doing? We look all right? Give me a thumbs up if you already mix your dough and your hands are clean and your dough is resting. If you're at that point, go ahead and weigh the salt and weigh the olive oil so that you can have it ready for when we use it. Remember to make sure to check that if you're making 2 or 4 pizzas, to use the correct numbers. Our timer is going for the dough. Weigh, as I said, the olive oil and the salt that you're going to use. And I'm going to give you 1 minute before we continue. And Raquel, let me know if there are any questions. Not yet, perfect. So I have my salt and my olive oil here. I'm going to put them by me. There.
Okay, we have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you do Polish with mother starter?
Yes, you can do Polish with mother starter. Actually, if you use a sourdough starter, it's kind of like making a levain. The only difference is that you would need the dough, like here we're baking the dough within an hour and a half because commercial yeast is so strong that if you were doing this with a sourdough starter, your Polish will rise way slower and you would need to make the dough rest once we have everything combined a lot more hours. So it's not like an instant replacement if that's what you want to know. It's not like you cannot grab the grams of Polish, make a levain, and then put it in here because all of the timings will be off. Make sense? I don't know who asked that. Stephanie. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Yes or no?
Yeah, I don't know. I was wondering.
Yeah.
But
no,
yeah, I
like,
guess it will take longer.
it will take way longer. And then, like, when you're making bread, you usually never want to substitute any ingredient for something else because there's some ratios that need to be taken care of that relate to time of a dough. And once you start messing that up, then everything changes.
Then I could not replace the same grams of my Polish that we made today with the mother starter. It won't work like that.
No.
Okay.
You could make it work, but you would need to know like how longer the entire process will be affected.
Right, and that's
Makes
the
sense?
thing
So
that I
it's
don't
better
know.
if you look for a pizza recipe that uses a sourdough starter.
Right.
It would be easier.
It's a lot of science that I don't know.
It's a lot of science, yes.
Okay, we have 2 more questions.
Thank
Why is
you.
the salt- Why is the salt not doubled exactly for 4 pizzas?
Probably because of the like little grams. Salt fine 6 and 11. It was probably like 6 comma something and it was just rounded up or down. What is the other one?
You substitute same weight in Polish for starter, but you just basically.
Yeah. No, just find a recipe. If you want to do something else like a sourdough starter, pizza dough, find a recipe that uses that. Actually, on the website, I have one that I use for my sourdough class with all the ratios and the adjustments needed for that. Okay, our timer, we still have 5 minutes. You should have waited your salt and your olive oil. You should have that by you. And go and get your whole milk if you're making ricotta and put it in a pot. I have it in mine in here because we are going to start slowly bringing that whole milk to a very light boil. So when we're making ricotta, first of all, you want to use whole milk. And why is that? Because cheese is the fat of the milk. So you're going to see that I am using like, what's the size of the milk? that I bought?
Maybe a quart.
It's like a quart. It's a quart. And I'm probably going to get like a little bowl of ricotta. If you're using a gallon, you're probably going to get like, you're going to see that it reduces a lot. If you were using 2% or skim milk, you would get barely anything. So that's why you want to use whole milk. A lot of the recipes for ricotta also use a little bit of heavy cream because you want to like increase the fat of the liquid so that you are able to get more yield. Okay, that said, put the milk in your pot and turn your stove to like a medium low.
It's a half a gallon.
It's a half a gallon? It's a half a gallon. So medium low. And we are going to slowly bring the milk to a boil, but a very light boil, which means that you are going to notice that the milk foams around the edges. It will take some time because it's been in the fridge. We just put it on the pot and we're going to slowly bring the temperature up so that we have time to add the salt in a bit and then the olive oil, and we can have that running slowly. Have with you, and I have mine here, a wooden spoon or a spatula because we're going to stir it every now and then so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. Okay, so make sure that your stove is on medium low. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. Let me make sure that this little guy is on. Okay, any questions on the ricotta or what you should be doing if you're doing that? No, milk on the pot on low heat and spatula so that you can stir every now and then. We are good then. Regarding the flours, I always get questions about not only like how can you substitute the Polish for a sourdough starter, but what if I use 00 flour, or what if I use bread flour? And in the family of the white flours, which in that family we have cake flour, all-purpose flour, bread flour. 00 is just making reference to the milling of the flour, or the white flour that you're using, which means that it's milled super fine. It's usually an all-purpose flour. And I remember someone by email asked me, can I use 00? And I said, yes. So in the family of the white flours, I said cake, all-purpose, bread. The difference between those three flours is the gluten content. And what is the gluten? Is when you mix that flour with water, it makes a dough. What is the ability of that dough to be very elastic and extensible? Cake flour, you can barely stretch it and it easily rip. All-purpose flour has a lot more strength and it can resist some stretching. Bread flour, more. When you're making bread, and mostly artisan bread in which you are not being super rough on a dough, you always can stick to all-purpose flour. If, for example, you wanted to substitute it here for bread flour, you can, but you'll notice, like if you make two batches and you make one with all-purpose and one with bread flour, you'll notice that the one that you use bread flour is way drier and stiffer, because the higher the gluten content the flour has, the more water also it's able to absorb. So that's like a really important thing to know. And that's our timer for salt. Between all-purpose and bread can be way more elastic and extensible. It also absorbs more water. So in general, you want to find recipes with the flour that you have. If you have all-purpose flour, find a recipe that uses all-purpose flour, because all those components will be already have been taken into account. Okay? Go get your bowl with the dough because we're going to add the salt. And I'm going to switch again the camera so that you can see what I'm doing with my hands. And if you are by the stove, give it a little stir before we get our hands all doughy again. Let me switch my camera. Okay, I'm going to put my scale away, and this is our Polish with the flour and the water that have been sitting for 10 minutes. I am going to add the salt now. I'm going to just sprinkle it on top, and I'm going to show you a little trick. A little trick. If you get a little bowl with water, you can put your hand in there just so that you get it a little bit moist. I don't want to add water to the dough. I just want to make my hand a little bit moist because that's going to allow me or prevent my hand to get super doughy again. So you're going to see, and again, we're not going to be nice with the dough. You're going to squeeze it just to make sure that all the salt goes around and inside. And look, from the little water that I added to my hand, I have no dough. If you start feeling that the dough is sticking to your hands, you can always go back to your bowl with a little bit of water, get it a little bit moist, just a little bit, and then continue mixing in the salt. Remember, I'm not doing this like super gentle with the dough. I am putting my fingers in there, combining, feeling that I am distributing the salt around the dough. I can actually feel that the salt is like on the outside, so I'm trying to bring it in by doing this movement with the dough. And again, if you're using a stand mixer, you can just turn it on and let the salt mix in the dough. Always on low speed when you're doing this part of the process. Okay, I have my milk here, so I'm going to give it a little stir in the meantime. And look, my hands barely doughy. Just thoroughly combining. There, and that's it. I feel like I can't really feel the salt when I'm doing this right now. So that's a good moment to be done. My hands just a bit doughy, so I'm just going to go ahead and wash them, and we'll be back. Stephanie, pour dough.
It's a good moment to let out everything, you know?
To de-stress.
Exactly.
Okay, I set the salt in. I already thoroughly combined it. I washed my hands, and I'm going to set a timer again for 10 minutes. Because after the 10 minutes, we are going to add the olive oil. Okay, so I'm going to cover my dough, and I'm going to let it sit here by me. And go stir your milk. Here, and I'm going to put the dough here by my side. I'm going to bring my milk here. How is everyone's milk looking? Still cold? Mine, I think mine wasn't on really like low heat because I can see it foaming, like starting to foam. So whenever I'm ready, I'm going to show you how to make the ricotta cheese. In this 10 minutes that we have, if you have not chopped any of your toppings, this is your moment. So take advantage of the time that you have so that you can chop some of the ingredients, ask questions, clean your station, and stir your milk. If it starts foaming around the edges, let me know and turn it super low. Okay? I'm going to be here stirring my milk because I'm almost there to make ricotta. Almost there. Raquel, any questions in the meantime? Nothing? We're all good?
Yeah.
Awesome. For the ones that are making ricotta, to be able to curdle the milk and make the cheese, we are going to use white distilled vinegar. So I'm going to get that so that I can have it by me when the moment is right. You see? Yeah, my milk is ready. So I'm going to put the overhead camera so that I can show everyone. And whatever you're doing, try to pay attention now to the camera so that you can see, because when I start adding the vinegar, the idea when you're making this type of cheese, which is the most straightforward cheese that you can do, is that we are going to bring the pH of the milk down with the vinegar, and that's going to allow the milk to curdle, which means that we are going to separate the protein, which is the whey, from the fat, which is going to be our ricotta cheese. When is the ricotta ready and we can put it on the cheesecloth to get those curds? When you see that the whey, so it kind of like separates in a yellowish liquid and you can see the curds. So let me show you so that everything makes more sense by seeing it. Okay, look at this. And I'm going to stir. It's starting to curdle. Starting, I can see there's some curds, but I still see kind of like a milky color in the water, right? So I'm going to continue stirring. I'm going to add a little bit more vinegar. And there, it's done. Look at this. See? I'm not sure if from the camera you can see that this liquid is super yellowish. And then I have those curds. That is the ricotta cheese that I'm going to collect using the cheesecloth. There you can see a more closer. And then this is a great way to extend the life of a milk that is on the day of expiration or just expired. You can give it an extra week. We are going to collect the curds, which are going to be our ricotta cheese, and the whey, so the liquid. You can actually save it because as it's the protein of the milk, so you're probably seeing at the pharmacy that they sell that powder that is called whey protein. It's just this dehydrated. And as I said, as this is a protein, it's very filling. So you can add it in vegetable soups, stews, smoothies, anything. So that you can also use both, how do you say it? Like results of making cheese. As I'm showing you here, and I'm going to put this on the side now. I have my bowl, I have a strainer, and I have this cloth. This is a cheesecloth. You can get it at Target, Walmart. Most of the supermarkets carry this fabrics. And I'm just going to put it through it. If, for example, you don't have a cheesecloth, you could get sort of like a mesh spoon, those slotted spoons, and you can collect the curds and put them somewhere else. So you can see here, that's the ricotta. And in the bowl, but this, there, I have the whey. So I'm going to let this sit because as we're making pizza, I don't want my ricotta to have a lot of moisture. So I'm gonna let it sit there on the cheesecloth for a lot, like during the class. And then it will be super dry and I'll show it by the end of the class so that you can see how it looks. Okay, who did ricotta with me? How is it looking? We're good. I see Lorraine. I see Karen.
We have a question.
Go ahead.
Do you know how long the whey lasts in a glass jar in the refrigerator?
I wouldn't do more than like 5 days. I always, you know what I do? I freeze it. I wait until this is cold and I put it in a Ziploc and I freeze it. And I also, if you like bread baking, and some of you have been to my sourdough class, I use the whey as the water in my sourdough breads. So you can also use it for that. That's a really good one. And actually, that's what I plan to do with the whey from the class. To use it as the water replacement in my sourdough bread. So I have my cheese here, just letting most of the whey come out so that it's dry for our pizza. Karen, did you do the ricotta?
Mine's still waiting to foam.
Waiting to foam, okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. When do I add it?
When I said, if you see that it needs to lightly foam on the corners, edges, around, perimeter. It doesn't need to be like a crazy boil. It just needs to be foaming. At that point, you turn the heat down and then you start adding the vinegar and you should very fast see how it curdles. Okay, see Lorraine working on her ricotta. Did it work? Yes, awesome. Going to give you a couple of minutes. We actually have 1 minute and 10 seconds before we add the olive oil on our dough so that you can finish making your ricotta. I'm going to grab my dough. Have a sip of water. I see you all running in the kitchen. I'm keeping you all busy. Okay, as I said, finish your ricotta. If you're having any issues or if it's not warming up, just turn the heat a little bit higher and keep stirring so that it starts foaming. Once it starts foaming, you can add the vinegar and you'll see how it completely separates and you get those curds on the whey. And I say the whey, save it for anything. If you make sourdough bread, for your bread. And that's our timer for the olive oil. Who wants 1 more minute because you're not ready for the olive oil? Say yes or no, thumbs up. Ali Cassandra, are you on the ricotta still? 1 minute, okay, 1 minute. If your milk is not foaming, crank it up a little bit. It should. And Raquel, any questions?
Somebody had asked, do they need to add salt right now or any season? That's
Leanne, and you're not John Half. What's your name? We didn't switch it. Let me see. Leanne, do you have any questions as you're looking at the class and you're able to process it more? No, you're good? I'm glad. Do we add salt to the ricotta? Ah, no, we're gonna do it later at the end. You can also, if you taste it just before we season it, you can take it either way. You can add, I don't know, maple syrup and put it and eat it with strawberries, or you can put salt and pepper and put it in the pizza. So you can take it any way, direction that you want. It's a very like mild flavor. So it works great either way. Karen, is it your milk foaming or not yet? Yes? Okay, Alicasandra also? Good. Did you add the vinegar? Yes, okay, good. And for the rest, I'm going to start showing the olive oil. The same concept as before for the ones that are still juggling with your ricotta. We're not going to be nice with the dough. You're going to add the olive oil and you are going to really put your fingers in trying to combine that olive oil with the dough. So let me switch my camera so that I can show you. So for the ones that are with the ricotta, don't stress. Just whenever you're done, add the olive oil. We're going to combine it. And it's just a little bit of olive oil. Just going to add it all. And the dough, you should feel now that it's become one from all the resting. And I'm going to explain after this why we're doing this process the way that we are doing it. As I said, we're not going to be nice with the dough. Just get your fingers in there so that you can combine the dough with the olive oil pretty well. Karen and Alicasandra, did it curdle? Yes? Okay, good. Like I still feel it's like oily on the outside, even though I can't really see the olive oil. So I'm going to continue mixing with my hand until it's like when you put on lotion, like you rub it until it gets absorbed. The same idea. And I'm going to try to clean the bowl with the dough as I go because then it'll be easier to wash.
Raise and curves is a bit sticky.
The dough, just add you added the olive oil or not yet? You added it? Yep, just put your fingers in there and mix, mix, mix. If you are able to get the camera closer so that I can take a look at the dough, that will be helpful as well. Okay, all done. Like olive oil has been completely absorbed by the dough. So I'm just going to let it rest. There, and my hand is a teeny bit doughy. So I'm going to wash it. And Lorraine, can you show me on the camera how your dough looks? No, it looks fine. Look. You're good. If you feel that you already combined the olive oil, like it's really mixed in, then you can stop so that the dough starts resting because that's also important for the process. There. I'm going to let my dough rest as I already added the olive oil. And wash my I'm going to set our timer because after this, we are going to start dividing and start shaping. Okay, I see everyone working. Going to give you a couple of minutes to finish what you're doing. And my ricotta is looking good. I'm going to try to get this table organized for our next part. So we already have added all the ingredients to the dough. We have the polish, the flour, the water, the olive oil, and the salt. And it's resting for 10 minutes. You should have your ricotta with you. Mine it's looking. Look. I'm going to show it here on the camera. There, I have the whey down there. And look, I have this little, see how it's not much? And I have it in here. So I'm going to let it strain a little bit more before I put it in a container to season it. There, and see that the whey is like a yellowish liquid. It's gonna stay here so that it dehydrates a little bit more. I want the ricotta very dry for the pizza. Okay. Okay, Karen, you are good? Olive oil, ricotta added, Lorraine. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. Okay, regarding the process that we're doing with the pizza, so we created the polish, right? If you noticed from the recipe, the yeast that we're using is all in the polish. We're not adding more yeast after, right? And as I said, the idea of using this polish, which is a preferment, is to add certain characteristics to the dough. So flavor, elasticity, and shelf life. All those are great when we're doing pizza because we really want to stretch the dough and hopefully we have a dough and a crust that is flavorful. When we're doing this process, as you saw, polish, then we do flour and water and we combine it. We just combine, we let it sit. Then we add the salt, we just combine, we let it sit. We add the olive oil, we just combine, we let it sit. If you probably notice, like, when are we kneading the dough, right? Because we're not being very active and working on the dough just because there's two ways to develop gluten. The idea behind kneading a dough, so putting it on the KitchenAid with a hook or working it with your hands, is that you want to develop the gluten. So you want to create a dough that is smooth and elastic and extensible to be able to make, in this case, pizza. But there's also another way to develop gluten when you have a little bit of space in your schedule, which is using time on your favor. So by letting a dough rest, just by not touching it, the dough on its own develops gluten. So that's why I was saying, mix it until you feel that there is no more salt or no more flour, dry spots of flour or olive oil in the case of the olive oil, and sitting the dough by giving it this 10 minutes works on its own. And it's actually is able to develop the gluten and relax, which are two things that we really want for pizza. The Polish, as it's been sitting since the morning, and as you can see from the recipe handout, I don't know if you noticed that there's the first column says baker's percent. Okay, so the Polish says it's 182 degrees, 182%. And it's like most of the dough is just the Polish. And as it's been sitting since the morning, the gluten in the Polish is super developed. So you have a Polish that has a gluten that's already been developed since 10 a.m. And then on that, you add these little steps and allow resting time in between, and you're able to make a really nice dough that you're going to see now without much effort. So that is like another trick. It's mostly like when you're doing sourdough bread, you're not working on the dough actively. You're just doing stretch and folds and then waiting for the dough to develop the gluten on its own. It's the same concept here, exactly the same concept. And then I'm going to test you. I'm going to test Leanne. Leanne, do you remember what I said about the family of the white flours and what's the difference between cake, all-purpose, and bread?
It's the protein content.
Yes, so the gluten that those flours are able to create.
Right.
Could we substitute bread flour for the all-purpose flour that we're using today?
Probably not best to. You should use the flour that the recipe calls for.
And what would you notice if you're using bread flour instead of all-purpose, if you're doing exactly this recipe?
It would stretch less.
No, it would stretch more.
More? Okay, well, I'm not gonna mess with the flours.
Bread flour has more gluten, but there's another thing that you could notice. That
Only
it would
water.
be drier. Because bread flour, so the higher the gluten in a flour, the more it absorbs water.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So you will probably notice like this is a really stiff dough that I'm like, it doesn't feel the same as using the all-purpose flour. And that's because bread flour is very thirsty.
Gotcha.
See, you passed.
Thank God.
Okay, any other questions? No? Another typical question that I get in class. Why do we add the salt later on in the process and not immediately when we are adding the Polish, the flour and the water? Because when I'm leaving the salt behind, I'm trying to give the first priority of water access to the yeasts that are in the Polish. Because once I add the salt in, salt does the opposite, right? So it will take away part of the water that the yeasts want. So I just want to get a head start to the yeast, and later on I can add the salt. Salt, even though a lot of people ask me, can I just skip the salt? I'd rather have like a dough without salt. But salt plays a really important role in the strength of the gluten that the dough creates. So even if you reduce the amount of salt in this recipe, try to always add something, because your dough will be way stronger, meaning that when you're stretching that pizza, it won't easily rip. If that makes sense. Okay. Regarding yeasts, another typical question. There's different types of yeast that you can find in the baking aisle at the stores, right? So you can find instant yeast, you can find active dry, And then there's like different names like bread rice, rapid rice, pizza yeast, and those are just different names for the same yeast. Mainly you have instant and active. The difference is that active dry, you need to, as the name says, activate it first in warm water, see it bubble, and then you can add it to your dough. Whereas instant, you just add it directly to your dough without an additional step. There's no difference. It's the same microorganism. It does the same thing. It's just how they're treated, how you wake them up, and how you introduce them to the dough. I always prefer instant. It's easier. You don't have to do that extra step. So that's why I always stick with instant if that's what I find. Okay, our timer went off. So we are going to start. We're going to take the dough out of our bowl and we're going to put it on our working table because we're going to sort of knead it a little bit and divide it. So also get something to divide. Get a little bit of flour to dust on top of our bowl and get, if you have a scraper or a knife or anything that will help you make like a clean cut on the dough. Okay, I'm going to switch the camera so that you can see from the top. There. Okay, so this is how my dough is looking. And I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of flour on top because I'm going to scrape it off the bowl. When I'm scraping a dough off the bowl, I always want to, using a little bit of the flour that I dusted on top, I'm going to put my fingers underneath. And I'm going to go around doing that movement because then I'm just going to flip the bowl and it's going to easily come off. So I'm going to flip. And there I have my dough and the side that I floured is facing the table. So it's not even sticking to the table. So there I have my dough. This is my bowl that I'm going to start soaking in water so that it's easy to wash afterwards. So this part, I haven't added any flour yet, so it's a little bit sticky. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of flour on top. Remember that I made dough for 4 pizzas, right? So I'm going to divide it in 4. If you want to make sure that all your pieces are exactly the same size or around the same size, bring your digital scale and you can weigh them. But I'm not gonna do that. We can have bigger or smaller pizzas. Okay, let me show you what I'm going to do first. So I'm going to use one of my pieces that I cut, and I'm going to bring the edges inside, sort of like a little dumpling. And it should look like that. And then the bottom should have like a rough seam. After I do that, I am going to cup the dough using this part of my hand, so my small fingers. And I'm going to cup it, making sure I squeeze it on the bottom so that I create that seam. And doing that, you also create tension on the surface so that your dough looks very smooth. So I'm going to start doing that, cupping, going around. How many times do you do this? As many as you need to be able to see that you created tension on the surface, and you should actually see some bubbles being trapped on the dough. So let me know if you see bubbles, because that's what we want to see. So I'm using there. Alicasandra, do you have a question or you're just looking at my hands? If you have a question, let me unmute you. Wait.
Yeah, it's still sticky. Is it fine?
If it's still
or-
sticky, you can do this. So let me pretend this one is sticky. I'm going to add a little bit more flour, and then we can knead it a little bit, meaning you're going to use the heel of your hands, push, rotate, push, rotate. Show me if you can bring one of your pieces towards the camera so that we can see it.
Like this.
Let me see. Yeah, just add a little bit more flour on top, and look what I'm doing here.
Mhm.
I'm going around and folding the dough onto itself.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
How's everyone else's dough looking? Lorraine, how's your dough looking? There. I'm going to add a little bit of flour there. Stephanie, how's the dough looking? Good? Fingers up, down. Looks perfect. Looks beautiful. Okay, and as I said, if your dough is looking like mine, which it doesn't, like I have it flour on both sides, so it's not sticky at all. But if it is sticky, just sprinkle a little bit of flour and then make sure that you fold it onto itself and that you go around. You can always knead it a little bit using the heel of your hands. But you shouldn't need to do this a lot. There, and then you can sprinkle a little bit of flour. If you have some pieces done, make sure to show them so that I can see how they're looking. There, Lorraine's working, Stephanie working. Okay, Alicasandra, were you able to figure it out? Yes, good. I'm going to cup it. I'm going to do what I did at the beginning. So bring the corners in, and then I'm going to go around the dough and I'm going to cup it. When you're cupping it, so I'm not going on the middle of the dough, I'm going underneath, because you want to make sure that you create that you create tension. There, around, tension. You just have to do it, I don't know, 5, 6 times, because you can overdo this. If you do the cupping too many times, you can actually, from the tension that you're creating, you can actually rip the dough on the surface. So you rather do it enough times so that you see that it's tight, that it's holding the shape. And I don't know if you can see from the camera, but I can see a little bubbles being trapped. And that is a good sign. Okay. I have my doughs here, and then as you continue cupping your dough, creating tension, I'm going to talk about a little bit what we're going to do now. So as you are shaping your balls of pizza dough, it's really important that when we are stretching pizza, that we do it in a way that you are not rushing the dough to get to the size that you want. So that means we are going to first go around the dough, making it flat, leaving just like an inch around, creating the crust. And then we're going to stretch it, I don't know, 5 inches, 6. We're going to let it sit so that it relaxes, and then we're going to work on the next one. The idea of doing that is that you need, when you stretch the dough or you knead a dough, the gluten stretches a lot, meaning that it won't allow you to stretch it further. So 5, 6 inches at the beginning, we're gonna let it rest for a couple of minutes, and you're going to notice that when we get back to the dough, it's going to be really easy to stretch it. So if at any point you feel that you're trying to stretch your pizza dough and it's resisting, leave it on the side, make sure that it's floured on both sides, and let it relax. It just needs a little bit of break for the gluten to relax, and then it's going to easily get to the size that you need. These pizza doughs, depending on how thick or thin you like the crust, you can take it to 12 or 14 inches. If you like it super thin, you can even go to 16. Remember that the only thing that you always need to have in mind is dough floured on both sides so that it doesn't stick. You can always brush it at the end before putting your toppings, and slowly working on the dough. Few inches, rest. Few more inches, rest. And you can work on your other pizzas today. If you made 4 doughs and you are not planning to make them all today, how can you store them? You can put them, let me get one of the containers that I use. You can use like a deli container, any type of container that will easily fit the dough. I'm going to spray it or put olive oil inside, and then you put the dough in. You close it. Even a little Ziploc bag works. And then you can put it in the freezer. You can have the dough in the freezer for up to 3 months. And once you want to make it, 30 minutes on your kitchen counter and it's completely full. So you can freeze it. If you want to make it today though, just put it in a container and let it tomorrow, I meant. If you want to make it tomorrow, put it in a container and let it sit in the fridge. Okay? If tomorrow, for example, you see that your container is like overflowing, that means that you want to do it sooner than later. Okay? Because at some point, the yeasts create so much CO2 inside that they start breaking the dough. And once you're at that stage, there's no turning back. So that's a good trick. Okay. I feel that we're already dividing and shaping our dough. So I'm going to show you so that we can start shaping. Make sure that your oven should be super preheated by now, that there's a baking surface, hopefully a pizza stone inside your oven. And you should have your toppings, whatever you decided on doing. And I'm going to start showing you slowly how to stretch them. Okay, look at this. Always you want flour when you're stretching pizza. And I always say don't add too much flour when we're sprinkling on the dough or anything, but at this point you can add the flour, the amount of flour that you want. The goal here is that it's not sticking to your hands and it's not sticking to the table. So the first thing, I'm going to put my fingers and I'm going to go around creating this crust. So as I said, I'm going to leave like an inch for the crust, and then I'm going to make the center flat, just pressing down with my fingers. Okay, start by doing that. Make sure that it's not sticking on the top or the bottom. Okay. Once I've done that, I'm going to see if it wants to stretch a little bit more. And a useful thing to do is using your knuckles. So if you let the dough relax on your knuckles, it should stretch a little bit more. If you feel that it doesn't want to stretch that much, okay, let it rest and you can work on the next one. Probably the dough that you shaped into a round shape first is going to be the most relaxed one and the easier to stretch. This one actually was the last one that I did. So let's see how this next dough treats us. Flour, remember, both sides, enough so that it's not sticking. And then pressing down, making sure that you leave like an inch around for your crust. And then as I'm pushing down, I'm also pushing a little bit forward just to see if I can get a couple of inches as I'm doing this. There. And then I'm going to put it on my knuckles, and you can completely feel that was probably one of the first ones that I did because it does want to stretch a little bit. You can do knuckles, and then you can also use gravity. So let me see. I'm just holding the dough and going around, letting it fall. Just like that, slowly. And then you can, once you have sufficient amount of inches to put both of your knuckles inside, you can actually stretch it by separating your knuckles. But be gentle because we don't want to rip it. You want to see if it wants to stretch. If not, you'll give it a little break. Okay, I'm not gonna rush it into giving me a couple more inches, and I'm going to go back to the first one that we did. I'm going to try to redo this part because it's sort of like shrunk back a little bit. So I'm going to use my knuckles. You can, as I said, I also showed this part that you can let it just fall as you hold it from the edges. And once you get to the size where you can fit both of your knuckles inside, we can stretch it like that. As you stretch it, you might need to add a little bit more flour on both sides because, of course, there'll be parts that are being stretched that now don't have any flour. And you don't want your dough to be sticky. So now feel free to use the method of your preference or a mix of each. Gravity, knuckles, being gentle. You want to get inches, as many as you can get, but without risking the dough from ripping. If you feel that it's fighting you back, let it sit and go back to the one that you were previously doing. You are probably going to notice the difference when you grab the dough that has been sitting because it will easily stretch. Knuckles. Yeah. And stretching, stretching. I'm going to go back to the first one to be able to stretch it a little bit more. That way, each dough gets to rest a little bit before you give it more inches. Lorraine, were you able to stretch it to like 12, 14? Not yet. Okay. There. Okay. And like it's so large now that I'm like using my wrists. I'm not using my knuckles anymore. Okay, I'm going to sprinkle it. It feels a little bit sticky. And I'm going to go back to the other one. There, remember to flour it on both sides if you feel that it's a bit sticky. Better to add flour than having it rip a little bit. So, as you see, just being patient here is key. Mhm.
This one is not round. That's okay.
That's okay. As everything in life, it takes practice to like make it round and have it the shape that you want it to be. Okay. Going to let them rest like a minute before I give it those extra final inches so that I can start putting the toppings on and baking it. So let me show you. We are going to use parchment paper because we are going to place the pizza on top. Then you are going to need like a cutting board, if you have a pizza peel, anything, because we're actually going to put. If there's a rip, try to pinch it and put it on the side so that it relaxes a little bit, and continue with the other one. As I was saying, we are going to put the pizza with the parchment inside of the oven. So we are going to need something to sort of like slide the pizza on the parchment inside the oven. So this is going to be our trick. It can be a wood board that you use for chopping or anything, parchment paper, and then we're going to place the dough on top, put the toppings, and then we're going to put this, slide it on the pizza stone or the baking tray that you're using. So the parchment is going to go inside the oven with the pizza. If now during the summer, you want to do this on your grill, works the same way. Preheat your pizza stone with the grill, and it's actually great because grills get to a much higher temperature. Imagine that professional pizza ovens bake at 950 degrees Fahrenheit, 950. It takes them 1 minute max to bake a pizza. Okay, I'm giving here my final inches before I show you how to place it. I'm going to start I'm going to put here this one on the side. So as everyone's working, we are going to put the dough on top of parchment paper and have it already on the tool board that you're going to use to put it inside the oven. So I'm going to transfer. When you transfer a dough, and this is also super common in class, don't be afraid. If your dough is nicely floured on both sides, you can fold the dough in a little piece and then put it on your board and reopen it again. So like that, you easily transfer. If you feel that it shrunk a little bit when you did this, you can lift it, give it a couple more inches, and place it back on your board with parchment and the dough on top. I am going to cut a little bit the corners because if not, they burn easily in the oven. Okay, who's gonna start putting toppings with me? I have my pizza sauce. here. Sauce. Remember that you are going to leave like an inch from the corner for the crust to rise. So don't put sauce everywhere, just there. And then here, there's no right or wrong, right? You'll do your own, whatever cheese you prefer, with or without cheese, anything. I'm going to put this one in the oven so that you can see it. There. We're going to put there. I'm going to put a little oregano. And I am going to go ahead and put it on my preheated pizza stone. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. Let me flip camera. And I'm going to set a timer for like 8 minutes. There, first pizza is in the oven. Karen, yours in the oven? No. Yes, no, yes. Okay, I'm going to switch my camera so that I can finish my second one. I'm going to get, as I have it almost to the size I want to, I'm going to put my board, parchment, and remember how I showed to transfer. If it's nicely floured, you can hold it and transfer it. There. And I feel that it shrunk a little bit, so I'm going to give it a little inch. As it's been resting when was doing the other one, you're going to see that it just it's so relaxed that it stretches a lot. So that's a good size. And I'm going to add my toppings on this one. The pizza, if your oven is at 550 like mine, it looks beautiful. It should take like around 8 minutes for the pizza to be ready. If your oven was higher than that, then put a timer for 5 minutes. If it was lower, probably maybe 500 is the most common temperature for home ovens, put a timer for 10 minutes. And then we are going to check the pizzas as they come out. Then this one.
Stephanie wants to know if she should have the stone in the bottom of the oven.
Yeah, the lowest the better. If the heat is coming from the bottom. I'm adding onions, cheese. Oh, wait, and our ricotta. Yes. Our ricotta. I'm going to add the ricotta to this one. So my ricotta is here in the cheesecloth. There. So I'm going to put it here, and I'm with a spoon or a knife, we can season it. I'm going to add Going to add a little bit of salt. Going to add a little bit of pepper, but feel free to season it with whatever you prefer. And then I'm just going to combine it. And remember how I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to get it super dry for the pizza, because if not, it'll add water to the cheese, which we do not want in this case. So here's my ricotta. I just added salt, pepper. You can add red pepper flakes, oregano, anything that you like. Okay, right there. I have my pizza here. I'm going to put ricotta on my pizza. There. A little bit of oregano. More cheese. And I'm going to add a little olive oil. If you go and take a peek at your pizza, it should be all nice and bubbly in your oven. I'm going to show you mine. It's almost done. Remember that if you're not making all of your doughs today, you can place it in a container. I'm going to actually show you with one as we wait for the other pizza to be ready. Ready? The idea is that you oil the container that you're going to use so that it easily comes out. So I'm oiling it here, and then I'm going to put the pizza dough in the container. And if I want to make it tomorrow, I'll just leave it in the fridge covered. If you don't want to make it tomorrow, put it in the freezer. For how long is it good in the freezer? For up to 3 months. So make sure that you use a Sharpie so that you label it and then you know when it expires. I'm going to put this one actually in the freezer.
Bobby, do you know how much ricotta that makes? Someone was asking about using it for lasagna.
Oh, yeah. So with half a gallon, what I got like a cup and a third of ricotta. So you probably need, depending on the size of your lasagna, the amount of milk. You probably need like a gallon. Okay. I'm going to show you my pizza. Look at this. Looks all nice and fluffy. If anyone's pizza is out, I want to see it. I'm going to put the other one inside in the meantime. Any pizzas out? I'm going to cut this one. It looks so beautiful. And I don't know if from the overhead camera you can see how fluffy the crust is.
She said she's playing catch up and started with her Polish late after work. It's scooping and yelling with the light on and smiling where it needs to be, just like my dad.
Perfect. Okay. A day after work, have a pizza stone, guess. I have a pizza stone, guess I'll need to get one. Well, you don't need a pizza stone. As I said, anything that will hold 500 degrees Fahrenheit. In the past, I've used a cooking tray. If you put it on, if you flip it, you'll get a flat surface that you can preheat and then place a pizza on top. Stephanie Tatasciore. Oh my God.
It looks so good. It's so
It-
crunchy.
Yeah, can you take a photo, please, before you eat it?
Yes, I'll do it. I'll do it now.
Nice. Yeah, Karen, then you need to show us your pizza when you make it. There, you can use a cookie tray. Yeah. Okay, so if you're ready, if you have any questions, make sure to send me your questions via the chat or after the class. Take a photo. Once you do it, I can see it. Even if you didn't do it today, if you do it during the weekend or next week or anytime, feel free to send me your photo. I always enjoy seeing whatever you make at home. I will send you after the class, I will send you the video so that you can save it and have it in the future so that if you want to go back to it to see everything that we did, you're going to have it with you. And anytime, I promise that I always answer questions. Feel free to reach out via Instagram, Facebook, my email, and I will be posting more of these virtual classes so that you can keep an eye out.
Thank you so much, Javi.
Oh, you're welcome. Just
Thank
send me a
you.
photo and I want to see what you made and how it turned out.
Fresh herbs burn if they add that, we have a question.
I like herbs like thyme or rosemary, though that is fine. But for example, basil, it easily burns, so that you want to add it once it's out of the oven. Because if not, burnt basil is no good. But any other herb resists fine.
Great, thank you. I've got an herb garden right outside the window.
Yay! Yeah, use it. Absolutely. Okay, I'll be hanging out here eating our pizza. So if anyone wants to stay, feel free to do so. If not, thank you so much for joining. It means the world. And I hope you enjoyed it, learned, had dinner ready, and just keep me posted.
Thank you, Javi.
No, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.